All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gien. I'm from Good Design Australia. It's been a real honour to be asked to come and speak to you today about the role of design, particularly in the context of humanitarian design. I realise I've only got about 10, 12 minutes, so there's a lot to get through. And I hope I'm going to leave you guys with some inspiring ideas. So I've got a small little presentation. I'm just going to try and share my screen with you. Hopefully all that works. Yep. Okay. So design. I've spent the better part of my life, just over 25 years, promoting the value and the benefits of design as a strategy within business. Not only to design better products and better services, better experiences, but really that holistic view of how design can actually help create a better world. I've had a very fortunate career, and most of that's been with Good Design Australia. A little bit of history. Good Design Australia has its origins going all the way back to the Industrial Design Council of Australia, which was essentially set up by the federal government back in 1958. In the early 60s and 70s, we even had Prince Philip himself hand over what was then called the Prince Philip Prize for Australian Design. It was the highest honour given to an Australian company at the time. And if you can think back to the 60s and 70s, there was no internet, there was no such thing as globalisation. So this idea of Australian businesses and Australian manufacturers using design as a competitive advantage was actually quite groundbreaking at the time. If we fast forward all the way through to 60 odd years later, Good Design Australia now runs our annual Good Design Awards program. It's got many, many different categories, everything from product design to architectural design to social impact, which is a category I'm very, very passionate about, through to fashion design, engineering design, as I said, just a complete breadth and depth of everything that we know as design. Last year during COVID, we established the Australian Design Council. This was a council really to advocate for the value and benefit of design. Again, very much replicating that Industrial Design Council model back in 1958. And there's a lot of work that's been we're doing, to really push design as a strategic tool within government. One of the things that's changed dramatically over that period of time is that design has really gone from, I guess, being this idea of just designing products to essentially designing services, designing systems, designing experiences, right through to how government uses design to design policy. So it's really at a point now where I wouldn't say design has become mainstream, but it's essentially this idea of designing everything is really at the forefront of business and the way that they use and leverage design. So there are 1,010 different definitions of design, and I really like this. It's really an adaptation of IDEO and how they position design, in that it is a human-centered approach to problem solving. It takes into consideration technology from a feasibility point of view, to a business point of view, is it actually viable? To a people point of view, is it going to be a desirable outcome? And most importantly, what impact is it going to have on our planet from a sustainability point of view? I was extremely honoured many years ago, back in 2007, to be elected to the World Design Organization. This is the global body for design based in Montreal in Canada. And one of the things that I think that organization did for me, I spent 10 years on the board and 2 years as president, was it allowed me to really see all the positive impacts of design around the world, but unfortunately a lot of the negative impacts as well. And for me, it was a real eye-opener to say we're actually designing things that we don't really quite need, that otherwise end up in landfill. And we as living in a country like Australia, obviously we need that kind of design, but we also are not leveraging the true potential of design. So we went together with a board of directors during my term, set about how do we actually change the narrative around design as a problem-solving tool. And one of the things we found was that the World Design Organization was one of the only global bodies for design that had consultative status with the United Nations. So it was an obvious alignment for us to align the vision and the direction of the World Design Organization to the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm sure you all know very well about. I personally like to call them the Sustainable Design Goals. So I'm going to just quickly share with you a few incredible projects that have come out of our World Design Impact Prize, which is very much aligned to these. Focusing on one, which is obviously an area that impacts millions and millions of people around the world, is clean water and sanitation. This is an incredible project. It's called the Waka Water. This was really based on the waka tree in Ethiopia, and it works on a very simple principle of using evaporation, humidity and condensation, where all this water basically trickles down and captures moisture out of the atmosphere, and then funnels it into a huge pot, which is basically fresh drinking water. An incredible project, really exemplifies design thinking, and also a lot of references to biomimicry as well, which is a really interesting area of design. Another project I wanted to share with you is the refugee housing project, which has got a really beautiful story behind it. This guy, young designer at IKEA, was really kind of, I guess, sick of his role and wanted to do more with his design talents, which is what I was saying before, and did a lot of research into refugee housing, refugee camps, and found that the current tents that refugees live in just don't cut it. They're extremely expensive. They don't last very long. These are very arid conditions, and just used his design talents shifted it from designing flatback furniture for IKEA to design flatback refugee shelters. So just incredible. You know, I really love this project. I think it's just, if we talk about the impact that design has on people's lives, and here's an interior shot. So, you know, probably not the most beautiful looking thing, but if you think this is getting people, providing them shelter and protection from the harsh elements outside, and it's funded by the IKEA Foundation. One other project, if you're looking at SDG number 14, Life Below Water, this is one of our projects that's come through our Good Design Awards. A lot of commentary around the Great Barrier Reef at the moment, and the impacts of climate change on the Great Barrier Reef. Unfortunately, there are areas of the Great Barrier Reef that are experiencing severe coral bleaching, and that's a massive problem. This is a project designed by a university student here in Australia, Monash University, called MARS. It actually stands for the Modular Artificial Reef System. It consists of a whole bunch of modular elements that are very porous. They are basically impregnated with live coral and dropped into areas that are experiencing severe coral bleaching. There are many projects like this. It's not the only one, but I just thought I'd share this with you because it's just a great example, again, of design being used to solve quite a complex problem. And then one of probably my all-time favorite projects that I have to share with you is this following project, and it's aligned to SDG number 3. Anemia is a terrible disease that affects many people around the world. And it's basically when you're not getting enough iron in your diet. This can lead to a whole bunch of really serious health implications down the line. So a gentleman who was doing a research project as part of his PhD in Cambodia, and the reason he was in Cambodia, he also discovered that it was one of the highest rates of concentrated anemia in the world. A lot of children, a lot of women suffering from anemia, and he also had the idea in his head that iron can actually be extracted when you cook on an iron pot. So if you prepare a meal on an iron pot, that iron actually dissolves into the food, and that iron can then be digested by someone. Obviously, these are very poor communities, and he couldn't afford to go and give an iron pot to every single different family in the villages. They all cooked with aluminium pots and pans. Their diets consists mainly of fish and rice, so they just weren't getting enough iron. So he had an idea of actually using a little iron block and distributing little pamphlets that explain to these people that they need to put this iron block in their cooking so that they get healthy. Well, obviously that didn't work, but this is where the design magic comes in, and the design story comes in, is that he came back, and obviously, you know, these people were using the little iron blocks as door stoppers, and the kids were throwing them around as marbles. It was like, you know, really frustrated. What do I do here? How can I try and solve this problem differently? What he discovered was this beautiful symbol in Cambodia of a fish. And he thought to himself, well, if I try and redesign this block in the shape of a fish and not try and communicate it to them that this is going to make you healthy, but it's actually going to bring you luck, maybe that would work. And that's exactly what he did. I'm sure many of you have seen the Lucky Iron Fish. It's such a beautiful project, but for me, a really great example of design being used in a clever way, in an imaginative way. Here's some video footage if you can see. He's even thought about how these things can be made by the locals, packaged by the locals, so it's not a complex thing to make, and relatively cheap. I think one Lucky Iron Fish can provide enough iron intake for a small family for quite a few years to come. He's now working with the United Nations as well to try and distribute this to all other parts of the world. So I'm sorry if that was a bit rushed. I only had 10 minutes, but I will leave you with one quote that is my all-time favorite. It's that good design solves problems, but great design prevents them from happening in the first place. So I hope that you've learned something from that short presentation. I actually would have loved to have been there in person. It's going to try and stop sharing my screen, but due to COVID, that was really, really hard. So I wish you guys all the best. I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope to actually see you in person at some stage as well. Thank you very much for your time.